Welcome to the Audrain Museum Network here on YouTube. If you like these videos, and we know you do because they've been millions of views, be sure to subscribe. And also, of course, hit the bell icon to be notified when we put up great new content. Welcome to the Audrain Automobile Museum and our exhibition, Collecting Moving Forward, Youngtimer Classics. And we're here with two great classics, this 1997 Dodge Viper GTS and Jay Leno.
Well, thank you. You know, it's fun to, or it's strange actually, to buy a car new and see it become a classic while you own it. I have a first gen just like this one. This is the first year of onboard diagnostics. Prior to this, you know, you had to do the rolling road for emissions. This is the first plug-in. You know, the most common question I get when I would drive it is, hey, why are the speakers on the hood? And you go, okay, those are not speakers, those are just air vents to get heat out from. But everybody asks that question.
But it's actually a very good point because a lot of the entertainment in a Viper comes from this V10 engine.
Right.
And so those could be speakers to let you hear the song of the V10 better.
It's interesting because I have the first generation Viper as well. I have the very first, actually it's the second one, Bob Gale got the first one. Black.
Bob Gale, the head of Chrysler Design.
Right. And it was such a crude car. There were no roll-up windows, you couldn't lock it. The top, you had to sort of figure out how to put it together. But it was a fun experience. It was so exciting at the time that finally there was a car to compete with the Corvette. I believe the Viper made the Corvette a better car because Corvette was resting on the laurels. Look, we got 350 horsepower. There's no other American sports cars out there. The Mustang at that point still wasn't, quote, a sports car. Mm-hmm. And then when this came along with 400 horsepower, that made Chevrolet introduce the Z06 with 403 or whatever it might be. And then it just kept, you know, going, proving that competition doesn't prove the breed. And going from my open car to this was a revelation because this had, oh my God, air conditioning and roll-up windows.
The first Viper, the bare bones Roadster, was very much inspired, obviously, by the Cobra.
Right.
The idea that this is a car that's just all about performance. It's not about any sort of concession to creature comforts.
Right.
They're there for the performance, for the drive. And of course, also, we talked about the great car guy, Bob Lutz.
Right.
And this is also one of his brainchildren.
Right.
And thinking about also romance. What attracts us to a car, what keeps us connected to a car is the romantic attachment and a V10 engine. This is the time when Formula One had V10 engines. So you're driving a race car on the road.
Right. And it was also, I remember the salesman saying, this has 400 horsepower. You'll never see that in a road-going car again. And it didn't seem like you would in the 90s because emissions were getting tighter and tighter. I remember even the 500 cubic inch Cadillac was down to 180 horsepower because of emissions. I mean, everything was being strangled. But you know, I'm one of those people that believe engineers will save the world. And it's true, you now have cars like a Hellcat, which gets 22 miles per gallon, whatever, on the freeway, turning 1,700 RPM. It's pretty amazing.
Give an engineer a challenge, and he or she will find a solution.
Yeah, and these were wonderful cars to drive. Still a bit crude, even compared to the Corvette. And this here was the single most expensive piece to replace in any American automobile ever. I mean, I don't know what it
one piece.
Yeah, it's all one piece. And when you crack this, boy, you're just done. And that's a big piece to get delivered and to pay for. Oh my God, yeah. It
doesn't stop you from driving your cars, though.
No. And I like the classic look of the Pete Brock coupe.
The Cobra Daytona coupe.
Yeah, it mirrors that. There was always a cartoonish element about the first gen Viper, the Roadster, whereas that was sort of cleaned up with this. It
the design seems more resolved with the roof because now you begin to see what these big bulging fenders and the big side cutouts actually make for the shape.
And this is a real attention getter. You know, kids would run up, what is that, blah, 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 you know. And again, on the cover of Road and Track and all the magazines, it caused quite a splash. I mean, Lutz called me up himself and said, you got to buy one of these. I said, I got the black one. I got to get the coupe. All right. So I got mine. I think mine was one of the very first ones. Mine is exactly the same color. It seemed like the prettiest color to me.
Yeah, it's
the
also
blue
most
with the white.
reminiscent of the great Daytona Cobra coupes.
Right.
Now,
right.
in terms of the driving experience, with this revised Viper, what is the difference between the driving experience of that first Roadster and this coupe?
Well, this one is a bit more refined. It's quieter. There's some weight saving going on. And they're starting to use, the first gen was literally parts bin, stuff they had left over because they didn't know it was going to be a success. So they just used what they could. The exhaust system was heavier, just a bunch of other things. This is a much more sophisticated car. Plus it had 50 more horsepower, which was quite a bit. That was really another 10% almost that you got. So whatever the air conditioning and the electric windows more than made up for with the bottom end torque.
And the fact that Lamborghini was also owned by Chrysler at this point, and Lamborghini had a hand in the development of the engine as well, which was the basic architecture was based on a truck engine, but it's a very, very different engine. A lot of people think, oh, the Viper is just a truck engine shoved into a car.
No, Lamborghini did the aluminum castings. They had expertise in that area, which is not something that Americans had a lot of experience with. I mean, it's very difficult to get metallurgy to do what you want it to do. It's a really hard job. Duesenberg went through literally hundreds and hundreds of blocks before they found one that could take the stresses of the twin overhead cam and the 4 valves and 265 horsepower. And it was the same thing here. There were a lot of problems. When I got my first gen Viper, it was a little off, and Chrysler came to the garage, pulled the crank, the whole bottom end out, showed up with new pistons, new rods, and put it all back together.
A typical early service.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and finally got it where I wanted. One of my pet peeves is when I see when people go after manufacturers. Like I had one of the first generation Ford GTs. So I got a call from Ford, and they said, listen, the A-arms, we'd like to replace them with billet A-arms, okay? We haven't found any flaws in the casting, but we did find some hairlines. Okay. They came to my garage, replaced them, and left. I said, thank you very much. And when that word got, I get, hey, Leno, how do you feel? Hey, you bought a lemon, what do you think? No, it wasn't a lemon. It didn't crash, nothing happened. They took a precaution. And I thought, why is the press, here's Ford doing the right thing. I mean, they anticipate there might be a problem. Let's fix it before anything goes wrong. And they got as much crap as if they'd ignored it and the car had fallen apart on the road.
It is a very funny thing, the attitude that many people have towards recalls. To me, it's exactly that. The recall is, we found this issue in a number of cars. We've sold 10,000, 20,000, 100,000, and we're now going to fix this so that you will not have this problem which might come up, which I think is a positive thing.
Right.
Manufacturers staying interested. We often talk about the transition of a car from, obviously a Viper is never an everyday car, but from a brand new push to maximum performance to a collector car. It's also interesting because did the Viper in your eye have that moment when people said, well, this is just a sort of silly thing of the period and it's not going to mean anything going forward. It's all this cul-de-sac in Chrysler history. What do you think about that?
No, the one that you're talking about is the Prowler. The Prowler made the cardinal sin of no horsepower. Horsepower sells cars in America. No matter what else is wrong with the car, if it's got more than enough horsepower, it's like a guy with big muscles. You're not going to get in an argument with him. Even if you're right, he's still going to beat the crap out of you. And that was the same thing. This always had plenty of horsepower, which is what people bought it for. We like going around corners, and it'd be nice if it could handle, but that straight line, put your foot in it and take off. So no, this was always a collector car from pretty much day one.
And I also think it's interesting that Chrysler paid attention to this car throughout its production life, and even with the ACR, really making it sort of track tune. So they were paying attention and saying, this is a car that actually means something. I think that makes a difference.
Well, I don't think they made a dime on the Viper program, but I think it helped sell all the mid-range cars. kids drag dad in to see the Viper, and then they buy the Pacifica minivan across the way, which is the greatest minivan ever, by the way. That thing is fantastic. But I mean, that's the idea of, there's no reason any car company should build a sports car from a financial point of view. It makes no sense. You make no money on it. Porsche was going broke building 911s. It wasn't until they built a four-door, and that's why you do it. But that's the heart and soul. That gets the enthusiasts going. You know, I mean, I honestly believe the reason the Alfa Giulia did not really succeed in America as much as it should. I drove the prototype at Monterey. I loved it because it was a manual box, and then it came to this country with an automatic. I'm like, why? It's an Alfa. I like shifting and that 5-speed up here and all. No, it just didn't bring it into the country.
I've got a Giulia, as you know. And
yeah, it's a wonderful car.
It's a wonderful car.
Yeah.
I think to your point about this, had they immediately followed up the Giulia with a new GTV, so there was that sports car there to remind people about why they're buying an Alfa Romeo. But this is a really interesting thing too, that the Viper is a car, as you said, when it was new, a lot of people thought, well, it's sort of cartoony, I don't understand it, it's just sort of brute force. But again, as a collector car now coming into its own, people recognize what it represented for the brand and for the idea of developing engineering in a brand that means performance. Dodge is defined as the performance brand.
Plus, they could have sold a lot more if they put an automatic, but they refused. So that kept the cachet. That kept it, oh, this is a driver's car. Oh, you can't drive a stick? You can't drive a Viper, I'm sorry. I mean, and there was something to that. So that kept it pure in the eyes of the purists, in other words. But it's way more than a footnote. It got Chevrolet off its butt to develop the ultimate Corvette, the ZR1 at the time, and all of those. And I think it upped everybody's game, and it made American cars exciting again. The Europeans, you know, made fun of it, but it was fast. You know, to this day, if you want horsepower, you come to America. Whenever Germans, especially Germans, when they come to my garage and they tour, is that Viper? Yeah, could we drive that? Is it possible? Because to them, the idea that if you're a working class German guy, you're a plumber, you got a business, a small business, you can't afford 500 horsepower. In Europe, that's McLaren or it's Mercedes-Benz. Or
it is so funny that you went there, because I was just thinking, I started smiling as you were talking about that, because these cars, the big block Corvettes, the big block Cobras, are incredibly popular with Germans. They love these cars, and the idea that there is this sort of attainable excess that only exists in America.
You can't get, I mean, what do Germans do when they come to America? They go to Arizona, they get on horses, and they shoot guns in the desert.
And they ride Harley Davidsons.
You can't do it in Germany. You can't shoot a gun in Germany anywhere. But here you come to America and you go out in the desert and you shoot tin cans like Clint Eastwood. You know, it's hilarious. It's hilarious. So that's what I mean. This was attainable horsepower, you know. Handling is subjective. Some people think it handles, some people don't. But acceleration is acceleration. And there's no substitute for good, solid American horsepower and torque.
And a great example of a collecting icon being newly discovered and respected. Collecting does move forward. Thanks, Jay.